Didn't have anybody sign up for any public comment for anything on our agenda today. So we're going to get right to our agenda. The first item is 1.1. And I believe, Angie, you're going to be on our first two items and then Ben on our next. So
that's correct, Chair.
Okay, do you want to
lead us out?
Lead us out.
Yes, good morning, Finance Committee members. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy here, and Dale Frost, our Fiscal Policy Analyst, will also be supporting this item along with me. You may remember last month we provided an overview of a couple of ideas of how we could fulfill the requirement in HB 42 from this last session to provide an impact analysis or of any proposed reporting requirements that will be including in board rules. And so we got your feedback last month, and based on that feedback, you'll see that there is a board policy 1002. That board policy is our board policy on rulemaking, which kind of describes the process that the board would like staff to take when it comes to drafting rules. And all the way at the end, Ben, if you could scroll down there, you'll see that there's a new section about providing a statement of the reporting burden or fiscal impact estimate in rules moving forward. And so you'll see that Dale has provided a new form, kind of a template that he'll be using, and has also provided two examples of what that statement will look like for R277113 as well as R277556, because both of those rules are in your committee today. And so the board policy, as you can see, the language there, it pretty much states, it provides direction that the board expects staff to provide a statement of the impact, and it includes all of these elements. And then the form that is in the backup, and I'm trying to think of the best way to go through this. Yeah, let's go to, it's actually reporting burden and fiscal impact statement. It's the third one right there. Yes, thanks, Ben. This is the form that Dale created that he'll be using as a template as he reviews the different rules. And just as a reminder, we discussed this last month. The rules are generally finalized, and we have a kind of a deadline of the Tuesday a week and a half before board meeting. So not 4 days ago Tuesday, but a week and a half ago. So that would mean me, Ben, and Jeff, we have those rules prepared and ready. And then that's Dale's opportunity to receive those rules and to work with staff on estimating the reporting burden and the fiscal impacts. So just something I wanted to note, you'll see in the board policy that these statements will not be ready or will not be attached as backup to Civic Clerk until the Tuesday before board and committee meetings. So that would be the Tuesday of this week, similar to what happens with contracts. And this is also similar to the process that happens up at the legislature. Bills will become public for people to see, and oftentimes the fiscal note is 3 to 5 days after. It won't be public to, the staff in the fiscal analyst office has a couple of days to work with LEAs, work with people like us or other agencies to determine that impact. That's what Dale will be doing on the rules. So I did want to bring that to your attention. That is in the board policy, that the deadline for those impact statements will be the Tuesday before the board or committee meeting where the rule is going to be reviewed. Mostly we're talking about rules that are going to committee, but you do know, rarely, but from time to time, we do have a rule that may go directly to the full board, like R277419 in the past couple of years due to COVID. There's been times when it skipped committee and went straight to the board. But for the most part, we're talking about the Tuesday before committee meeting where they're going to be presented. So maybe I'll take a little pause and then turn the time over to Del Frost, Chair, if that's all right with you. If you could turn the time over to him, he could maybe show you the impact statements for the two rules, and maybe that will give you a little bit more of an idea. And then we can be open to your questions and seeing if there are any amendments to the board policy or the form that you'd like to discuss or propose.
Okay, our fiscal policy analyst, Dale Frost, you want?
I'm here, Chair Huntsman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Stallings. My thought is to quickly go through that first form that you were showing, and who's driving? Is that you, Angie, or is that Jed?
It's Ben.
So we can, or Ben, excuse me. Ben, if we can go back to that, and I can just go through quickly some of the general questions and considerations and why these questions were put into these different boxes and from where they're coming. And then there's still some open questions that we have for board members and get some feedback to you on, because this is a new process that we're trying to define. So again, House Bill 42 requires only a few pieces of this first section here. So if you see here, the first question is, does the rule include a proposed report? And this essentially comes from the statute. We're defining a proposed report. So this would be a new requirement. Any additional data or information an LEA must provide to USB that is not required by federal law, code, or another state entity. Where this gets a little tricky is quite often in statute, it directs the board to create rules. And so, you know, where is that line when we're asking for data that is required by Utah code if it's not specifically spelled out? Because often it's not spelled out in statute, and that's the purpose of rule, to do that. And so I anticipate that there are times where we might say, hey, there's no proposed report in this, and either the field or board members or others might say, no, there is a proposed report in this rule, and this is why. And we can always amend. And the process that we're thinking about is, you know, let's say that rule gets approved in committee, we can amend the fiscal impact statement or the reporting burden before it goes to the board for passage. So that's kind of the thought process here. The second bullet point, some of these questions come from House Bill 300, because if you remember, there was a suite of 3 bills that were really intended to analyze and, where possible, reduce reporting burdens on LEAs. So, you know, so House Bill 42 doesn't require us to identify the purpose or who is submitting the report, the frequency. Those things, though, we think are very valuable in trying to align whatever we do for House Bill 300 and House Bill 42. So we added that to the form, and that's the same for those final 2 bullet points. We're trying to really analyze, if we are requiring additional data to be reported, is there another way? Do we already have that data? And so you can have that information as you are considering a rule change. And we think this will be a value add to your process. So that's the first box. Any questions on that, on the reporting burden part of the form?
Questions?
Okay.
Board members or committee members?
No.
Well, Jim, dive in.
I guess I love this. First of all, I just think this gets really to what I kept hearing in that working group from you know, school leaders and district leaders. My only question is, and this goes, maybe I should hold this question. I had one other type of question I thought we might consider adding. Should I throw that out now or wait until we walk through it a little bit more?
Put it out now, but in case you forget it.
So I think this bullet point, whether it's otherwise available or could be achieved through other means, is really useful because it goes beyond the particular impact of the report itself to a broader, I would assume this would include a cross-department look to say, is this or can this be gathered by somebody else, so that rather than fulfilling the particular task in front of us, we're kind of looking around a bit more to say, okay, is somebody down the hall doing something similar? Do they have a project in the works and we could combine this? And I assume that's what this is getting to. It's not simply a single department or group question, but one that would involve some kind of cross department. Is that correct? Is that kind of the way this would play out?
Chair, may I answer that question? Vice Chair Moss, yes, I think that that's how it would play out. Let me provide a little more context, kind of how I'm thinking about this. You know, those bullet points that follow that first bullet point would really be contingent on that first bullet point. So, you know, if we think that there's a proposed report, then we go down this process to go and ask about that. You know, that's the question, and it really comes up when it comes to statute, you know, where we are required to create rules, and that's where it gets a little tricky, because even if it's a new bullet point or a new report piece of data that has to be reported, but it's clearly within the intent of the bill that's directing us to make the rule, you know, is that a new proposed report? That's a question that, because that would be required by Utah code, even if it's not spelled out. And so that's where I think that the field could say, no, that is a proposed report or not. But assuming that this is, that we agree that, yeah, you know, we might not, the statute, it's a little unclear whether we need to gather this data or not, but we need to gather this data for XYZ purpose. Then we go down those points, and then we should assess and ask broadly across USBE, are we collecting that data? Is there any way else that we can answer that question? You know, and then if so, then there could be the conversation at the committee level. Do we want that data collected or not? You know, there may be some reason that even if that data, maybe the data is in a different form or would require a lot of effort beyond our existing processes to, you know, to process it in a different way. I don't know. It had to be done on a case-by-case basis, but we wouldn't do that unless there is a proposed report identified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that captures the intent of the law as I understand it. And I've had a couple of recent discussions with Susan, with Representative Pulsifer, about, you know, kind of how we're moving forward. And I think this captures that intent, you know, that just so that it's not kind of so linear. There's a statute, there's a rule, there's a report, and then there's a burden. That instead, like you described, we stop for a second, just ask, all right, we're required to do this, or maybe we're not. Do we need the data? If we are required, does it also fall into this one over here? And, you know, I was involved in a different project where we were reviewing a number of education bills over the last 10 years. This was involved in an early iteration of ULEAD, and we had an intern pull through 10 years of education bills and what tracking was being done to follow up on kind of the implementation and ROI on those bills. And there were a lot of loose ends hanging out there after that interesting deep dive. And so, you know, that's, I think, what you're describing is a way of avoiding those loose ends where you do take that pause and say, okay, this is all well and good, but so yeah, I think that's great. The one that I wonder about, that I think whether we might have a question about how the impact of the report will be measured, kind of the, you know, the Scott Jones juice worth the squeeze question. Is there something like that might be asked up front within those questions? Is that, okay, if we've made the decision that we do need this report, it's required, or we feel it's necessary for whatever reason, it seems like the most efficient way to get the data, it's not duplicative. How are we going to make sure, you know, this data serves its intended purpose? I don't know. That's a deep question, but I wonder if it might just be a threshold question to include with those bullet points. So that's just a suggestion. But I guess if I could ask one other question, Chair, I'm kind of.
Yes.
I guess the other question is, would this apply only to reports? The other thing we heard in that working group was, that, some of the same thing comes up with respect to assurances and surveys, and would report be defined broadly as any request for information or data, any new request for information or data from an LEA? Obviously, if it's already in place and you're just asking for this month's or this year's data, it's not going to come to the board, right? But if it's a creation of a new survey or a new assurance, would that be included in the definition of report?
May I
May
answer?
I answer? Oh, go ahead. Or
Is that all right if I do?
Deputy Superintendent.
Either one.
Thanks, Chair. So just as a reminder, it would if it's included in the rule. So like if we are requiring a new assurance or there's a survey, like an annual survey, I'm trying to think of, we have that rule, for example, that requires, well, and actually the statute required us to do an exit survey of educators, right? But we also added to that, USBE did, the board, where every other year, or I think there's an entry survey of teachers as well. So that would be an example of a survey that is included in a rule that, yes, would be included. But if it were a survey outside of a rule, that is not included, obviously, in this process, because this process is meant to accompany new rules that are coming to the board for consideration. But absolutely, if there's a new assurance added, a new survey added requirement in a rule, that is included in the word report. It's pretty broad. It's a broad term. But it is limited in the sense that it's limited to those things required in board rule.
All right, thank you. And sorry, one last follow-up, and I'll be quiet. Can I?
You're reminding me of somebody else that says I have a question, and now we're to number 3 or 4. But
The question is very broad.
Really relevant, but I think
I can hold. I see Stacy's hand. I'll hold my other question.
Get your question. I want to get it before it's gone.
And Chair, may I try to address Vice Chair Moss's first question that he asked, because he asked 2 in that.
Well, I just want to make sure his first question's answered.
I think Angie answered his second question, which was about what is report broad enough. But the threshold question is the other piece. May I answer?
Yeah.
Try to address that. So, Vice Chair Moss, and we really do want feedback from the committee how to answer that question, because that's, where is the line between providing the data and the information to policymakers in a policy call? And the threshold question, in my opinion, starts to get into the policy call. Is the juice worth the squeeze on this? And that's where it's a little challenging. I don't know how, from a staff level, we would answer that, where we give our opinion, but that's more of a policy call. That I'm wondering what feedback and thoughts the committee member has.
Yeah, and I guess my sense there was not necessarily, although I think the committee would be very interested in staff's conclusion about whether the juice is worth the squeeze. I guess I was thinking more along the lines of whether we might add a question to be included on that form that would say, how are we going to determine whether the juice was worth the squeeze after we put this into effect? Like, is there a way to kind of double back after we put this out to the LEAs? What's our intended outcome from this? And is there a way for us to come back and say, okay, did that actually give us something that was valuable, or is it just one more burden on their plate? So I don't necessarily mean that, that's a little bit of clairvoyance there to ask beforehand whether it will be,
Right.
But so, yeah, thank you. That helps. I'm sorry. I'll hold off on my other stuff here.
Isn't the juice worth the squeeze to be resolved in the report's purpose? Now, what we choose to do with it is a whole different, a whole different kind of evaluation that would happen post reporting, which is maybe another bill or another policy. But I would, well, Angie or Dale, if you want to respond to that, to my question is, wouldn't the value of the purpose or value of the report be found in the report purpose? That's my question.
I agree, Chair. And I was trying to think, and I'm writing right now a potential question we could add. I was thinking something like, is the information, because of course, is the juice worth the squeeze? We all know what that means, but it's not probably the right thing to write in this report. So I was thinking, what about something like, is the information being obtained through the proposed report of enough value to offset? I don't know if that's the right word.
So can I see a caution out there, and I see this in the IT world, is then you're going to have another process. I'm just worrying about too much process. Then we'll have another process to determine how do you go about evaluating how much juice you got out of the squeeze. What and what where did that data go? And what decision tree is that found? And I mean, you can just keep going into process. So I'm just throwing that caution out there, but I believe you almost have to get this out and try to have it in the body of the report's purpose. And if there isn't a good purpose, then you don't move forward on it. But hey, that's my worry. I just a concern as a board member. We have a couple other hands up. Member Hutchings and then Member Hart. Member Hutchings.
Yeah, thank you. Just something Angie said reminded me of a question I've kind of had in my mind previously. And I'm not sure if it rises to needing to add it to one of these questions, but I think sometimes there are reports and rules that when you look at the time put into it by LEAs, we look at it does have the time spent preparing the report, but a lot of times when we have new reports or just new actions that an LEA needs to take, there's a lot of time spent in the upfront training of how to do that, of how to fill out the report or how to change that process. And sometimes I'm not sure we're all aware of how much time it takes and how much time is invested in the upfront training. The exit survey kind of reminded me, and part of that was because I think the exit survey was the first time many of us started using Qualtrics. And so I spent a few hours in a couple different trainings learning about Qualtrics so I could do the exit survey. And now, I've learned about it and, I don't need to do that training anymore. But I think sometimes we forget that there's some upfront training time in some of the things we ask the LEAs to do. And it may be a question that we can add to training and preparing the report, or just something to keep in mind as we're asking LEAs to do new things.
Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes, yeah.
Member Hutchings, that's a really great point. And, my thought is, right now, assumed in these questions that the cost maybe on an annual basis is the same. But if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying, and it's absolutely true, that especially in the initial year or years, the cost might be higher and then it goes down. And so maybe we could have a question after the estimated time to say something to the effect of, are there any additional upfront costs or costs to get this process started, or something along those lines that are about training or those sort of things that might get to those initial costs?
Yes, and the way you said it, I think that might be worthy of an additional question. I like that a lot.
Which an additional question would be an amendment to what we have in this, not an amendment, but a different draft, correct?
We can, Chair, may I answer?
Yes.
These specific questions, the buckets, the boxes are in the rule, but the specific things looking at, we can just amend the form. There doesn't need to be action from the committee, but we did want feedback from the committee.
Oh, okay, thank you. Member Hart.
I very much like the addition of preparation, the initial preparation or initial training, because that's exactly right. Year one might be pretty rough, but subsequent years are not quite so rough. And I think that's a more accurate picture of because it might be worth it to spend that time up front. The item, about the follow-up is I share that same concern. But I think reflecting on it, it's more of a desire to have an overall department feedback cycle on whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze. Like, when do we go back and review the things that we put into rule and we add, and we, it's always the process of addition. It never seems that subtraction doesn't really appear too many times in organizations. And that's what we need to do to make sure that we're fiscally responsible. But I don't, at the end of the day, I don't think it necessarily goes here. I think it's perhaps a separate rule, a rule to remove rules. I don't know, but it's that concern that we just keep doing and doing, even when the rewards are diminishing. And I think that is also some of the feeling that caused the trio of bills. So I don't know if this alone will meet the need or even the expectation. I don't know. I see the need for that follow up. What happens after? Do we just do this to forever? And when do we really evaluate? But I just don't see it. I don't see us being able to answer that crystal ball kind of question on a form like this. So that's my 2 cents.
So Angie, can you speak to that? I think her question is, this is an on-ramp to adding additional reporting. What is our off-ramp to that?
Exactly.
Besides rules expiring. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. The off-ramp portion of the trio of bills is later in the agenda. You'll see, I think it's either agenda item 8 or 9, where it says HB 300. That will be where Darren Nielsen and Jill Curry will be describing some of the work they've been doing to prepare a process to receive feedback from staff, as well as then other stakeholders, including LEAs, on existing reports. So that is a separate process. This is just one part. And as you correctly stated, you've got this part that's the on-ramp. We've got HB 300, that's the off-ramp. And then the third part to those trio of bills is us as helping the fiscal analyst office at the legislature correctly identify the reporting and fiscal impacts that they are including in their legislation. So those are kind of the 3 parts. That third part about working with the legislature, I don't know that there's anything specific that you'll see as far as a rule or board policy or report. It's, in a lot of ways, I think it was meant for the fiscal analyst office and the legislature to kind of do almost like what we're doing here, is to remind them that they also create reports and have reporting burdens, and to ask USBE to be prepared to help as a facilitator or a conduit with LEAs to correctly provide that information to the legislature when a new report comes up.
Chair, can I add a little bit?
Yes.
I guess, yes. I guess more specifically, and it's coming up now because, right, this cliff that we'll hit with ESSER funds and such. I don't think every rule, and I guess maybe it's, now that I say it out loud, it's sunsetting and that kind of thing. But I think we should spend a little bit more time when we put a rule in place to decide whether or not it needs to have shorter end dates, or be thinking of like more long term than the immediate need. So yes, I agree, and that the 300 meets that. There are some things that I think we put into place that could be much shorter, and we don't always consider that we could put an end date on things. And I just I just think we need to use end dates more, I guess, now that I say it out loud. And that's a question that we could have asked. But then I look at the questions, and I'd actually like to see if we could remove one or two. We're making a report longer to make a report shorter. And I just want to make sure we hit that balance.
Angie or Dale, did you want to respond? I've got a couple other questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll just say something, and then Dell, if you want to add, I'm sure maybe we're going to address different things, but I did want to remind two things. One, obviously our rules do have to be reviewed every 5 years. So there's always an opportunity once it comes back up every 5 years to evaluate and see if there's something that should be changed. But two, another thing we could do, which we really don't do often, the legislature does, is we could sunset or put, we're going to have this reporting requirement or this legal requirement for 3 years, and then require the superintendent to evaluate it and give a report, for example, to a committee.
Right.
That is something you could do. The legislature does that often. And that's, in fact, there's going to be one today where the Education Interim Committee is going to be looking at the early warning pilot, the early warning system pilot, and that had a sunset on it, and now they're going to be doing a review. So that is something to consider in the future. We don't do it often here at the board, but we could.
Okay. Dale,
Madam Chair, if I might add, Deputy Superintendent Stallings is absolutely correct that House Bill 300 is the intended off-ramp. And there's no process or rule change or process change right now recommended. I think it's more of an update, and it's the beginning of that conversation. But I do recommend to committee members to start thinking about, on the House Bill 300 side, we have to go through a whole host of existing requirements, but we do want to make sure that process gets to any new reporting requirements down the line. And so, and how do we do that? And maybe it's the way that Deputy Superintendent Stallings said, where it's about a specific rule. And I wouldn't worry too much about too many questions in this first box, mainly because from my experience, there aren't a lot of proposed reports that are outside of statutory requirements. You as a board don't seem inclined to add a heavy burden when you can avoid it. And so, as you saw in the examples, neither of the rule changes that we have a proposed report, even though in one of them, there is obviously some reporting requirements, and I'll get to that and show the examples. You have to report. There has to be some way to pay for this charter school reserve account. So there has to be some communication somehow or be part of a process, but that is very much intended in the bill. And so that's not a proposed report in that sense. And then we'll get to fiscal impacts in just a second. I hope that helps to address some of the concerns of the off-ramps.
Chair might be frozen.
Yeah, looks like
Yeah.
Kristen, can you go?
Yeah, I think Jim was before me though. Go ahead,
Oh,
Jim.
Jim.
Oh, either way, I've talked enough. Go ahead. I'll come back to mine.
No, I just wanted to just kind of follow along, and this goes along with a lot of what Dale just said, and that was, as I look through this list of questions, I really like the layout. I like the format. I like the bullet points. And I agree. I think that it does provide us with some linear thought, which is important when we're going from A to Z. But I also do think that as we introspectively look at this new form, it provides us with more of a kind of a modern day flowchart, because, if this, then, or if not, are we going to A, B, or C? So I think that is provided in here. The other thing that for me as a board member, and I realize that, that's not the whole intent of this, but it helps me know when I am evaluating, this is one more really good piece for me to use as I am evaluating information that comes through, because to know specifically what that impact is going to be on both USBE and LEA, to see it in black and white is an important evaluation piece. And so I think that, I don't think it's necessarily going to add a full off ramp, but it might dissuade us from going down a certain road, because we see what that is. And I think, and I hope that is an important intent of what these are going to do, is to help all of us evaluate a little bit more on new actions that we are asked to look over. And like Dale just said, the more considerations there are up in that top box, I mean, maybe not the more, but having sufficient considerations are important. So I don't think we necessarily need to hold back on that. If it's something that we need to consider, we need to consider. So that was just my 2 cents worth.
I'll throw another question if we don't have chair, if that's okay. My question, I guess, first of all, I like the discussion of the off-ramp. I appreciate that. My kind of juice worth the squeeze suggestion in putting it in the form would only apply to that particular report, where we'd say, okay, how are we going to determine whether this has been worth it and should be kept? But in the broader context of 300 as the off-ramp, I think that's exactly where it belongs. If that's a standard process that we have, where we know that for each report, the general rule is going to be, we will evaluate it after 3 years and decide whether to keep it, and we'll look at that point at the ROI and that kind of thing. That would be great. Then we don't necessarily have to build that into each question. It's kind of a process, and I think that would be very helpful. I second that idea that we build in, whether it's a sunset that says, okay, it's been 3 years. Is it, do we still need to keep this going? That would help us to avoid the accumulation. My question is just more of a scope question again. What percentage of the data gathering requests or requirements, whether it's assurances, surveys, reports, whatever, grant applications, what percentage of those roughly, I know that's a tough question, comes through rules? I assume it's a lot, but I just kind of want to get a sense for to the extent to which we are going to be addressing what we're hearing. And I know, we hear one part from the field, and then we hear from inside our office why we need this. But just in getting a sense of the scope of the number of things that this rule, or excuse me, this policy would address. Any sense for that? Like how much of the ongoing data reporting obligation would be captured by this rule or policy, excuse me?
Well, I can try and answer that. I mean, the lion's share of the league. Oh, Superintendent, I would defer to you. Answer that.
No, I just wanted you to know that, there's Chair Huntsman. I was trying to let you know that he got kicked out, and I wasn't sure who the host was to let him back in. So Angie, I'll defer to you to answer. Okay. Sorry about that.
Great, no problem. This was discussed, before the legislation, and the majority of the legal reporting requirements we do have go through rule. There are opportunities, and I guess the question is, what is required by statute or federal law? It can be very nebulous, but I'll give an example of some surveys we sent out as the CARES Act and all of these ESSER funds were coming out. We have no rules on all of those federal, grant programs, but there were some surveys that were sent out to get a sense of what LEAs were needing, as well as when COVID hit, Our office, I think, sent out some surveys to see what needs were with respect to PPE and, COVID mitigation. None of that was in board rule. None of it was necessarily required by federal law, and it was very time sensitive. There are some surveys that our staff send out because of things that are timely. COVID's probably a bad example because hopefully this won't be happening again. But I just did want to give you an example. There are times when our staff reach out to survey people about different things that aren't necessarily in board rule. But I would say the majority of the required reports are either going to be in federal law, Utah state or Utah code, and board rule. That's where the majority are going to be.
And to the extent that we are using our own discretion and judgment to create a report that's not directly mandated by statute, that decision would bring it within the scope of this policy, correct? So that even if the statute says, hey, you got to go accomplish X and give out some money, if we decide to add a report to that and we use our judgment about how that report should look, then that would come to us, even though the source is coming out there. Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure we're kind of handling the bulk of where this accumulation comes, whatever source it might be, that it kind of funnels through this decision-making tree or flow chart. Thank you. I think Chair's back. We were kind of winging it without you, but.
Oh, you take point. I'm kind of concerned, Angie, on the time. We have 3 hours and agenda, but still circling back to this, I appreciate the work that staff has done and the work that you guys have done as a committee prior to this. I'm not sure if we'll ever, and there's an opportunity that as this thing moves forward, as it goes before the board, that the board can add additional questions or take questions out. But there's no question in my mind that this rule is well, number one, is going to create a little bit of an internal burden, well, a lot of a burden to USBE before they go up and require report and or information. The upside to this is that we'll be able to inventory how many of those said reports, what are they like, and tell a whole different, I think there's another story to be told to our education community about what's federal, what's state, what's USBE driven, and have all that separation. So I appreciate the work that has gone into this. Angie, was there more presentation on this rule that you guys were proposing?
Chair Huntsman, we do have a little bit more on the fiscal impact side, the other two boxes, and I can make that brief. Did we lose Chair? Oh. Yeah, so if I can just go over the following part of the rule on the fiscal impact side, and then just show some consideration examples. I just need a few minutes to go over that. So as we mentioned in our last presentation in June, we at USBE, through the Office of Administrative Rules, have to try to identify fiscal impacts to USBE and LEAs for rules, but that's not required in law to have that come to you before committees, and we're recommending that we do that. And Chair Huntsman, you are correct that this is adding additional burden internally, and our hope, though, is that the value is that it can really be a value to you as board members to provide this information beforehand. And so it will be a new additional burden internally, but we think it will provide value. Again, these are direct independent costs or savings. So I want to go through an example and get your feedback on one specific question. So Ben, if you can go to the example. So let's just go through, so the R277113 example here. And let me just show you. So this bill, this was a rule change that did not come from a statutory change, but it came I'm still trying to figure out how to articulate this. They'll articulate the rule change better, but it impacts USDB on certain reporting requirements and other processes. So when I talked to USDB and Carl Empey over there at USDB to find out what would be the impact to USDB, that there would be some small savings, but not significantly. And we didn't go into a lot of detail what those savings would be, but Carl told me maybe the word is minimal savings. We don't know where that line is, but we thought this is a sufficient information to show you kind of what the impact to USDB would be on that bill. Just wanted to give you an example there. And there is no impact to LEAs because there's no real change to LEAs in that rule. So, there are a lot of times where the costs and savings are not really easily measurable, but we still want to try to identify whether there are costs or savings and the extent of that. So if there are no questions on that, let me go to the other example. And this is where I have a question for committee members. So Rule R277556, this is coming about as a result of House Bill 425 that created this charter school closure reserve account. And if you look at House Bill 425, there's some language that requires board to make rule on, I'm looking over here in subsection 6 on how to calculate these amounts and a process for collecting and a process for depositing. And as I go through the rule, there was nothing in my mind that seemed like we're going above and beyond the required reporting requirements or additional impacts. But can we go to the last thing that's attached? I wanted to show you the actual fiscal note because this goes back to, so the fiscal note for House Bill 425, there is a requirement that charter schools pay to this charter reserve account $2 per student. And the estimated cost in year one this year is $162,000. So there's clearly overall an impact of $162,000, but that's not due to the rule, it's due to the bill. So I'll wrap up quickly. So Angie and I thought, maybe the easiest way going forward is just to include a link to the fiscal note for any bill that is impacting a rule. And we just wanted to run that by the committee.
So are you guys have any objection to what is being proposed here or additional member Moss, Vice Chair Moss?
I don't, and I'd be ready to move it forward with perhaps one slight amendment. I wonder if we might just include a definition, a formal definition of report to include, something along the lines of data gathering tool, including assurances and surveys, whatever it was, as we discussed earlier. I don't think that's defined. And so perhaps we could amend to include the.
Angie?
The definition of proposed report is actually the defined term in statute. It's right there. If you look, you can see it. It's on 53E1205. I would propose that we keep the definition of proposed report the same as it is in statute. If you wanted to, we could. I guess I thought I had included that, but maybe we could add that definition to the definition section if you'd like, and just copy that definition of proposed report that's in statute.
Chair, could I?
Vice Chair Moss.
I just wonder, what I heard a lot from the school leaders was that they wanted to make sure we didn't just do formal reports, but include those other things like assurances and surveys. I don't know if that's how formal you need to get on that, but I don't see that in there. And it sounded like we would at least consider that to be included. Is that something that could be clarified, or would that be too prescriptive? And I'm sorry, this has taken a long time. I apologize, I'm dragging this out. I think we're about there. I just want to make sure we respond to all those kind of personal concerns from the different school leaders.
Yes, we can. Do you have, I mean, I can, it'll just take me a minute to think through some language and maybe do a shared doc with Ben about what that language would look like. So if you want to give me a minute, I will try and think of something.
Thank you, Chair.
Has a question or comment? Stacy?
Yes, just maybe a question and a comment. Looking at the policy itself down in number 3, I was wondering, it said, the first part said, and you guys mentioned this the Tuesday before, I'm wondering if does it make more sense to put a number of days before the meeting if for some reason the meeting that it's being posted for is a different day of the week, and so you don't need to go back into policy and make a change. So if the meeting's changed, I think for committee meeting, you know, it would be Friday, but let's say we have committee meeting for some reason on a Monday. I don't know how easily those things have changed, but I've heard it's changed a little bit in the last few years, that maybe it makes more sense and would stand a little bit longer if you didn't put a day of the week, but a number of days, how many days that is before the meeting. I don't know if that makes a big difference or not, or is worth an amendment. And then, yeah.
Sorry, before you continue, I think that's a great idea. I'm wondering if Jerry's on and if I could switch to be the one who's presenting, because I've got the draft rule. Let's see if I can. And then that way I don't have to try and send stuff to Ben. And sorry, go ahead, Board Member Hutchings. I think I've got it resolved.
Okay. That was my first question. And then I actually had, I might need to think this through a sec. I had another question about then the 3B, and I think you answered it. My question was if we're just using the fiscal note, which makes sense, and you just answered that. But then if we're using the fiscal notes, we don't have any answers about the report. Oh, never mind. Well, do we still get the information about the time it takes for reporting and all those other great questions that you have in the form?
Chair, if I may answer, yes. So that the fiscal impact, if would be that second box. So we'd still try address that first box on if we think there are any additional reports.
Okay,
reporting requirements.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Angie?
Yeah, sorry, I am just trying to save this document as a different draft really quickly. I apologize. I didn't expect another draft, so I just need to get this saved so that, and I am almost done. I apologize. So what, Board Member Moss, could you say again what you wanted? Report includes an assurance or?
I think assurances and surveys were the information gathering tools. Perhaps we say information gathering tools, including. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the concern across, but I'm not sure I've got the mastery of the technicalities. I know assurances and surveys were brought up.
Sorry. Would that work?
That looks about right to me. Those on the committee that received these probably know better. I don't know if I'm missing a tool that ought to be included.
Chair, in the kind of question of the report, so it's a little broader than what's in the statute. We define, for my purposes, I was defining any additional data or information an LEA must provide to USBP.
But you just have to hold on. I'm doing something.
So it'd be good to include that in the definition, and also we just don't want it to be just assurances and surveys.
Yeah, right. I agree with that. Thank you. Yeah, I meant to expand the definition, not contract it, just to include, yeah, assurance and survey with what Dale said.
And I'm Angie, I'm wondering if that's limiting in us also, but
Can we just say means any information gathering tool? Include or
It means the same. And in fact, we just had a rule that has the term any in it, and the Office of Administrative Rules rejected it back to us. Any is not a good term to use because it creates I mean, I guess the question is, an information gathering tool really does mean any information gathering tool. It's
okay.
the USBE, Utrex information gathering tool. That's when it would be more specific. So I think this does include any, but if there are any, we'll use that word again, recommendations for how to make this language stronger, we could add more. It's pretty broad. Information gathering tool is, I can't imagine anything that we use to obtain reports that wouldn't fit under that, but I could be wrong.
wouldn't you put a may include an insurance or survey instead of including an insurance or survey?
Again, it's a drafting form, and that is what that means. So it's not exhaustive. Including an assurance or survey just means it's a subset of the actual definition. So yeah, this is just usually when you say including an assurance or survey, it's kind of to remind people that these are examples. It's almost like an example of that broader term. So this information gathering tool is broad and could include 50 things, but we have decided to pull out these two, I think, because Board Member Moss is concerned that maybe it wouldn't be thought of, is what I understood his concern to be when we bring these rules forward.
And my other concern, and now we'll go to Member Hutchings here, is would an LEA think that it's limited to assurances or survey that might already be in there?
Chair, I know, and I apologize. This is very technical, but many times in legal contract world, they might say including but not limited to. This is essentially the statutory drafting or the rule drafting version of including but not limited to, and it is part of the drafting manual. And you'll see this frequently throughout our rules where we say including, which does not mean it's exhaustive. It means this is an example and it's not limited to that. So essentially that is what this is saying here. If there's something we're missing as an example that you think, not you necessarily, Chair Huntsman, but anybody would like to add, we can add additional examples, but this is not limited to just assurances or surveys.
All right. Member Hutchings?
Okay, just thinking this through a little bit, I understand why Member Moss or whoever spoke with him would want to include assurances or surveys, because some of those assurances do take quite a bit of time. And some reports are in the format of a survey, but I'm also thinking every once in a while, I'll get a survey from someone at USBE who's just trying to check a pulse, is just trying to gather some quick information from school leaders and I wouldn't want them to think that they need to go through this process before they can send out a more informal voluntary survey, that they're just trying to gather some quick information from the field. So maybe we're better off just leaving it.
Angie, don't I understand this? Help me with this understanding. This rule says USBE is not going to do those. If we're going to ask, this is like any ask. If we're going to ask, this is our process. Is that correct?
So, Chair, may I speak? I do think that Board Member Hutchings brings raises a good question. I mean, this is the defined term, proposed report. And I will tell you that term was very much took a lot of time to negotiate in statute. And it was by design meant to be things that are limited to what is included in board rule. And if you look at that defined term, you'll see that. And that was because of things like what happened with COVID. And the board wanted information, for example, on what were LEAs doing as far as their instructional time. Were they doing 2 days in, 3 days out, 4 days in person, 5 days in person? You'll remember the board asked a lot of information related to COVID mitigation to support and answer questions before the school year started last year. And that was an example that we gave when they wanted to make it very broad and say, anytime any staff person reaches out to anybody in the LEA, they wanted this. And it makes it so that we can't be timely. I mean, if there's an emergency or something coming up, or let's say the legislature is asking for information, related to a fiscal bill, and we're wanting their input on something. So reason I give that as an example is this proposed report definition was very by design drafted the way it was. And I think the reason we didn't define report was so that we didn't miss something. And I do worry, I want to make sure as well that now this term isn't somehow making this broader than what is included in rule, because I think the intent that I understood the legislation was to make sure that as the board is creating new rules or putting things into rules, that we are considering all of these things and fiscal noting them or reporting them. But I mean, because proposed report is what is used below, I would say that that's why originally I was just saying report includes these things, because but anyway, hopefully this is helpful. That is the expectation, is it's really about these requirements included in rules.
Okay. Vice Chair Moss. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think the general limitation on the scope of this is that it only applies to those information gathering tools that are required by rule. And so then the clarification would be, if it fits that definition, it's being done by rule, it also applies to assurances or surveys. I don't know if that's unnecessary. Again, I'm just trying to reflect the concern I heard that, make sure it applies to not just the formal report, but these other things. It would not, I understand it, intend to apply to the informal kind of quick response things where you're just testing the pulse and asking that kind of stuff, because those aren't being implemented by rule to begin with, right? So that would fall outside this. So I don't know the best way to do this. I appreciate Angie putting it up there. And if it's not necessary or confusing, I'm happy to withdraw. I just want to make sure that we address that kind of concern that I heard several times, that it's the little stuff that kind of isn't a formal report that accumulates. So thanks for accommodating me. Whatever everybody thinks is the best way to include that in the reports that are implemented by rule is, I think, gets the job done.
So Member Moss, an option is you could, Angie's putting a draft 2, and move a draft 1 forward or the draft 2 forward in between now and our board meeting. If we want to get better clarity on intent and what we're really trying to do, you could propose an additional draft as you're trying to discover, or not discover, as you're trying to meet the intent of your concern.
Chair, I apologize, now that I'm screen sharing, I don't know how to turn off my hand raising or turn it back on, but I don't know if you can see now what I did here. I think this might work. I changed it so that proposed report means the same as that term is defined, in statute, and includes an assurance or survey. And so again, it's not exhaustive. Then it wouldn't, to Board Member Hutchings' concern, it doesn't somehow expand the definition from statute so much that there's questions. So I really appreciate all of your feedback, but I don't know if you feel more comfortable with that. I think it meets the intent.
Member Hart?
I think that's a wonderful place, and I move that we recommend that the board approve board policy 1002 draft 2.
Okay, we don't need a second. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Vote is unanimous. I appreciate the dialogue too. This is good stuff. Okay, Angie, we've got you for one more and then Ben.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And again, I apologize for the hand raising. You can just ignore that. But
Next-
good news is R27753, this next item, we're recommending be repealed because the reporting requirement for USBE to collect information on Section 504 accommodations from our LEAs was repealed in HB 42. And so this rule simply was a rule to meet the requirements of that statute and is no longer needed. So we recommend that the board repeal R27753.
Do we have a question or a motion? Member Vice Chair Moss.
I'll move that we recommend that the board repeal R277-751-3.
On first reading and forward to the board.
Excuse me, on first reading, yes.
The board to, okay. I'll state the motion that the committee approves R7-753 repeal on first reading and forward to the board for repeal on second and final reading. Discussion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Vote is unanimous. Hey, thank you, Angie. Good luck for the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Ben, you're up for item 3.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So item 3 is Rule R277113. The amendments to this rule came about based upon recommendations from the Audit Committee that staff look at this rule and consider its impact on USDB. A number of the provisions in this rule ended up being duplicative for USDB because of their role as kind of a dual state agency and LEA. And so we've done 2 things in the rule. The first thing is that we have amended the definition of LEA to take out the Utah Schools for the Deaf and the Blind from the general scope of the rule. Generally, we add in USDB to the definition of LEA if we want the rule to apply to them. So what we've done is we've taken them out at this point. And then at the very end of the rule, I'll scroll down here. We've added section 11, which tells which specific sections of the rule need to be are relevant to USDB and that USDB should comply with. And so we called out those 3 sections. The rest of the rule basically is already duplicative for USDB because of their existing responsibilities as a state agency was the feeling. And so the recommendation would be that the board, that the Finance Committee adopt draft 1 of this rule.
Okay, questions? Motion. And I can't see, well, I can see all the players, but I'm not seeing everyone that's online and where they can raise their hand, but okay, now I can. Member Hutchins.
I move that the committee approves R277-113 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. We have a motion, discussion to the motion. Seeing none, the motion before the committee is that committee moves that the committee approves R277-113 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board to approve for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And what's the next one, Ben?
Hey, thank you, Chair. The next rule that I have to present to the committee is R277-556. This is for the charter school closure reserve account. This is a new creation of the legislature, which requires that charter schools contribute a certain amount per year per student to be put into a fund to cover issues that may arise if there's a charter school closure in the future. The legislature specifically delegated the board the task of identifying a few details as far as how this would be conducted. And so that's what we've attempted to address in this rule. The intent in the rule is that the staff would take the October 1 counts to determine what contribution is needed consistent with the formulas identified in statutes, and that amount would be withheld from each charter school in their mid-year budgetary allotment. And then the statute specifies how these funds can be used if there's a closure in the future. And so that draft 1 is what we have to present to you today. And we have staff here who can answer any questions you have about this process.
Questions, comments? I thought it was a very simple approach, an easy rule to be in compliance with and execute. So thank you for your work there. Vice Chair Moss.
I've heard no concern or objection. I'd be prepared to bring a motion to adopt.
Okay, so I think your motion would be that the committee approves R277-556 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Would that be your motion?
Correct. Yeah, I was waiting for the language. Yes.
Okay, very good. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, the motion before the committee is a committee approve R277-556 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair.
I believe next is, come back to my agenda here, if we'll jump back up, is item 5. It's actionable. We're getting report from our RESAs, Regional Educational Services Agency. I can remember when they were called something else, but just part of their evolution. And it's sure fun to have these guys, have this group come back. We used to rub a lot of shoulders together in the past as we were coming up, changing some proposed statute and that. So I guess, who's taking point?
Superintendent Northcott from Daggett. I'm supposed to be presenting. I believe that there are other superintendents here. Joby Wright from one of the RESAs. Duke Mossman is here. Duke, who else is here with our group?
I think Superintendent Hatch, and yeah, so there'll be 4 superintendents participating as well as myself running the slides. So I have my screen sharing. Are you seeing my slides or are you seeing something else?
Well, Superintendent Northcott, the time is yours for your report.
Chair Huntsman, how much time would you like us to take?
Well, I just want you to get through your report. We've kind of on a tight schedule, but this is your moment.
Okay, Duke, are you sharing then?
Yes, I will start sharing. Just want to make sure you guys are seeing my slides.
Duke, I can help share too if you need me to.
And
Okay.
Okay, I've got a slide up.
Got a slide up? Okay.
Duke,
We
do
are
you want
ready.
me to lead out through this whole thing, or do you want everyone to take a turn?
Yeah, everybody's taking a section. So I've got the first couple of slides and then each superintendent's going to do their RESA's section. And then I've got the last slide at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so starting off, thank you for meeting with us.
Hey, Duke, when
Yes.
each of you guys take your spot, will you just state your name and title for those that are listening and that aren't familiar with you?
Will
Thank
do. Yep. So thank you very much. My name is Duke Mossman. I'm the Executive Director of Northeastern Utah Educational Services. We are the regional RESA that is based in Heber City. And as you'll see, there are 4 of us. So we'll just go ahead and hop right into the presentation. Thank you for having us today. So there are 4 regions: News in the Northeast, SCSC in the Southeast, Hughes in Central Utah, and SCDC in Southwest Utah.
Sorry to interrupt, Duke. Would you mind presenting that instead of, right now we're seeing top right,
slides.
top right.
Okay, I'm trying to see. There it is. Okay. Got it. Okay, so we were originally created in 1969 with the main purpose being to serve rural school districts and provide opportunities for economies of scale and educational equity. And so this is how we were originally constituted in our 4 regions back at that time. And when we were created, we were called regional service centers. And these are how we see tying into USBE strategic goals. The RESAs were created specifically to address educational equity and access for rural Utah students and support LEAs through professional development opportunities and to assist teachers in achieving their learning goals. Safe and healthy schools. Again, we are grateful to be part of the state's mental health grant program. And so each of the RESAs are able to provide mental health services to assist with the safe and healthy schools goal. Personalized teaching and learning. RESAs have been heavily involved in professional development for educators across the rural school districts and charter schools, and continue to be strong in that area, providing online curriculum training, as well as digital tools like online curriculum programs, etc. And then along with the goal of effective educators and leaders, RESAs provide professional development opportunities throughout the year in many different ways, through endorsement programs that actually earn credit, through conferences. We just got done with our Rural Schools Conference last month, and various professional development opportunities as requested by our boards. Basically, our RESAs were created to act as a service agency or a support agency for the rural school districts and LEAs within our region. In 2020, SB 79 was passed by Senator Hilliard and Representative Last, and that changed our names from regional service centers to regional educational service agencies to align more with what's going on nationally, and it also kind of modified our definition a little bit about what we could participate in with USBE. And here are some of the other things that it did. So it added RESAs to the definition of education entity. It created the RESA Coordinating Council, which includes Superintendent Dixon and a couple of the state school board members who are on that council as well. Created a budget review process for us, granted authority to provide services to students, and granted authority to apply for us to apply for LEA grants and access LEA programs through USB in the state where it makes sense. We are in the process of discussing when this bill was passed. We thought that we were going to be included also in the definition of LEA, but that did not happen as part of this. And so there are some things that we're trying to clean up as far as reporting, what kind of responsibilities and access that we do have to certain things. And so Angie has put together, Angie Stallings has created a committee. We'll be having our first meeting on August 13th and are hoping to clear up any remaining issues that we have through that committee and through some rule changes later on in the future. So anyway, just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, I'm going to turn the time over to Superintendent Hatch in SCDC to give their overview of SCDC.
Okay, thank you very much, Duke, and appreciate the committee and everybody giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about what's been going on with our service centers. And we are very grateful in rural Utah that we have something like the RESAs, because there's just so many things that we could not do if we didn't kind of get together in some way and share the responsibility. For example, one of the things that's been really helpful for us is when we have teacher candidates in rural Utah, we don't always get to hire somebody who's already licensed. So we have to sometimes hire them and work with them to get licensed. And to go through that, we need to provide some quality college courses in pedagogy for our teachers to take. But for any one of our districts to do that on their own would be very difficult and really impossible. And the number of people that we would have to take those classes wouldn't be enough to justify the work. So the service centers have worked really hard to put together these classes. They're working with universities, and that's just one of many examples of things that we wouldn't be able to pull off if we didn't have the RESAs. So Southwest Education Development Center, the SEDC, is based in Cedar City, and we have, you can see there the list of districts. We have the most students of any of the RESAs, and we have the largest number of teachers. Mostly we can give credit to Washington School District for that. We also have the most charter school members. And in fact, every charter school in our area is part of the development center. You can just see a list there of several of the initiatives that SEDC provides to the districts and charters in our area. EduRoam is one of the big ones that affects everybody. And then some of these really are impacting mostly just a couple of districts. So sometimes it's just a few districts who need the help, like in Oleo. That's something that only Garfield and Kane are needing help with, but thank goodness we have the service center that can help them with that. In the next slide, you'll see that the SEDC provides a lot of higher education services as well. We're grateful for the support that we get to be able to put principals through training. Teachers can get these endorsements. Some of them listed here are educational technology, elementary math, elementary STEM. Also, the SEDC supports school districts as we work through the changing landscape of licensing for teachers and the APPEL program. On the next slide, you'll see that through grants and other initiatives, the SEDC provides a lot of other supports as well. For example, autism services. Because we can work together to accomplish some of these things. Autism grant, we're the only RESA to receive that grant, and we have Paul Day, who is our regional autism specialist, providing support to all the districts in training and in other ways as well. Sterling Scholar Program. One of the things that I thought we would highlight here is the additional mental health resources, and that's provided through a mental health counselor that has been hired through SEDC. and a board certified behavior analyst, both extremely valuable and needed. And again, thank goodness that we have the service center to provide that. You see the picture there. Hopefully you can see that picture. It's the winner of the second annual regional art show that all of the students can participate in. And this is Happy Smiles by a student in Escalante High School. And just a great example of one of the many things that the SEDC helps us with.
Anything else, Superintendent? Oh, guess not.
Oh.
Okay, we're moving on. Our next service center is Hughes, and Superintendent Squire will be presenting that information.
Yes, thank you for having us. We appreciate this very much, the opportunity to show our gratitude for your support in the service centers, as they are so invaluable to the smaller school districts. So Hughes, Central Utah Education Services, is based out of Richfield, and that's kind of in the middle between Wayne, Paiute, and then Tintic and Juab, and then the Seviers and Sanpete's in between. So that's who they service. The Hughes Service Center has 10.5 FTEs. That's about 1.5 per district. But man, we get our bang for the buck out of them in what they provide for us. We have about 755 teachers, and they really help us out. If you can go to the next slide. On the next slide, you can see some of the services, and these will be very, very similar across the board to all 4 service centers. But one of the things I wanted to highlight a little bit is some of the computer repairs that we have. It says right there, we've got, oh, I'm on the wrong, you're on a different slide than I'm on. Sorry, let's see.
You want me to go ahead, Ralph?
No, just the Eduroam has helped us a ton. The security and data private specialists, the regional ALIO, they've helped us so much, especially with our malware, ransomware. I don't know if you're aware, you probably are, but our systems are attacked sometimes thousands of times a day. And the security that the Hughes provides for us and all the regional service centers are so important. It's incredible. We're very thankful for that, because we don't want to be paying the $1.5 million like the University of Utah or any other public institution. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. On this slide, you can see some of the endorsements, once again, that are so important to us. ESL endorsements, APT. We had over 40 Apple people who were in rural Utah. Sometimes you teach your major, you teach your minor, and then you teach 2 or 3 other subjects, and they have to have endorsements in those. So the Apple program has helped us and is so invaluable to us that we rely on it so much. And we're grateful for our service center heading that over for us, and it helps us so much. Next slide. There it shows those 40 that are doing that. One of the other things that they do for us is, you can see in the middle, it says we've had over 1,000 computer repairs of iPads and Chromebooks. And in these smaller districts, we have gone a lot to technology and devices, and you stick all those devices in the hands of young students and teenagers, and there's going to be some stuff that happens to them. They're dropped, they're broken, and they have in the Hughes service center, they have a computer repair shop, and one of their employees repairs. And if we were to outsource this to other companies, it would cost us so much, and we're so grateful for that. They've helped us with grants and getting overdrive and e-book checkout stuff. So great services. Once again, the psychologist, we couldn't afford one specifically for our own district, so we're grateful for them to have that. Slide.
Thank you, Superintendent Squire. Superintendent Kay is up next with SASC.
Hello, thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity to present. My name's Taryn Kay, and I'm the superintendent in Grand District. And I'm fortunate to be able to be the chair of our SESC board for this year. Our SESC is located in Price, and we're really remote down here. So they're located near Carbon and Emory school districts, and then Grand and San Juan. We're down in the corner, as you know. We have one participating charter school, Pinnacle Academy. Our SESC has 5 staff members. We serve over 10,000 students and 670 teachers. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. As you've heard from the other superintendents, there's much that our service center provides for us in terms of UEN kinds of services. EduRoam, you've heard that more than once. That's a way for our students to connect to the internet, no matter where they are in the state. And for us, when our students travel to athletic or activities, our high school students in particular, sometimes our closest away game is a 3-hour bus ride one way. And so EduRoam is super helpful because it allows our students to be able to access the internet to do homework or stay up with their studies. And it provides the same level of security as if the student were online in one of our buildings. This is very, very helpful for us. You can read through those other things that happen with UEN, but that's one of the most effective for us. You can go ahead to the next slide. The delivery of higher education services, many of these happen in collaboration with all of the RESAs, which is something I'd like to highlight. You know, our RESA serves our region, but we also access services from the other service centers as well. And it's so nice because I know a lot of the big districts, especially along the Wasatch Front, have many staff members who can help to provide a lot of these services. But for us, in many cases, it's just me, or I might have delegated to a building administrator. But in our district, I am pretty much the district office staff. And so some of the things to highlight here, you've already heard about the Appel teacher licensing. It's super helpful to get, to have a way to get teachers licensed who already live in Moab. It's super expensive to move here. And so if we can get people who already live here to pursue a degree through an alternative means, it's really helpful. And the Appel service that our regional service center provides has been just enormous for us. The Rural School Conference is amazing and gives rural educators an opportunity to hear from some of the industry experts. That's been very nice. And then, of course, the endorsements that you've already heard about. You can go ahead. More that public and higher ed. One thing to highlight here, nobody's really talked about the Sora ebook system. It's an online library system, and which allows our students to have access to thousands and thousands of books at no cost. It's amazing, and you can see that between our staff and students, we've had over 31,000 checkouts in our region. And that's amazing because we're a small student region. And the spelling bees, things that are coordinated at a regional level that we don't have the staff to pull off by ourselves, has been super helpful. And the one thing I think that's been the most helpful, as I listened to you this morning talk about all the rules and the reporting and all of those things, when grants come out on Utah grants, like I said, sometimes I'm the only person in the district office really. And so to write the grants and do all the things that are required is really work intensive. And our regional service center has taken that on in several cases. One is the early learning grant that thankfully provided early learning coaches to us. Another is mental health grant, which allows us to access psychological services that we might not have been able to access. And so those grants are immensely helpful for us, and it's nice to have SESC coordinate those for us. Go ahead. So we don't have, like I said, we don't have all the students, but we are 21% of Utah's total area in our 4 districts. And so that lets you know how remote we are and how sometimes the distances between us are formidable. It can be, you know, a many-hour drive to the next closest district or district office, or even school in San Juan. They have hours between. So we're really appreciative of the service center and to the board for your support. And we really couldn't offer the educational excellence to our students that we are able to offer because we have them. And thanks again for the time to report today.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next up is Superintendent Northcott representing news.
Yes, Superintendent Northcott from Daggett School District. You can see on this slide that news is based in Heber City, 9-member school districts. You can see them listed on the right side, the school districts, and 5-member charter schools. And you can see the names of the schools that are involved in the charter program. 6.5 FTE. Duke, I think that we've just added some FTE since this slide was produced.
Yes, this is based on last fiscal year. So we've added 4 FTE for the coming fiscal year, and we'll be up to 10.5 this year.
And that's based on grants that we've received. Superintendent Kay mentioned the early learning coaches that we've just hired 3 of those, and the psychological services, we're sharing a psychologist and others, 33,000 students, et cetera. You can see those things. We have a regional network engineer. Daggett relies heavily upon the engineering services for our computer systems, regional technology trainer. Again, you can see the stats there, 173 on-site visits, 864 teachers trained. We hold a monthly technology council. Next slide. We're heavily involved in the educator endorsement programs. And again, as others have mentioned, there are things that we do within our own RESA, but some of those things are then shared across the whole of rural Utah. And so some of these programs originate from news, but include the other 3 RESAs. For example, if you look down the 3rd bullet, second from the bottom on this page, the online curriculum Edgenuity, this is actually a program that began in Daggett that expanded to news and now includes school districts across the state, not only in RESAs, but has expanded into school districts that are not part of RESAs. This is a really, really effective use of our purchasing power. The price of this product is probably half now compared to what it was when we started, when Daggett started on this. And that's talking about the purchasing power of a bigger coordinated effort among school districts. We're heavily involved in the Apple program, mental health services. For example, the news hires a BCBA. Daggett uses those services. We could never afford to hire a person with this training there, and quite frankly, there aren't enough of them available. So if every school district had their own BCBA, well, it's just not going to be possible because there aren't enough of them. And so sharing one BCBA among 14 different entities is an effective way to go. And Daggett uses this service in a very effective way. Cooperative purchasing, again, the diseconomy of scales for most of us. So as a small school district, we enhance our purchasing power by joining together as a larger purchasing agency. You can see other things there. Wasatch Back might be the best conference training offered off of the Wasatch Front. You can see other things that are listed there. Next page, Duke.
That's it. Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, I think the last slide we have is just a slide of our annual performance goals that were established with USBE. So professional development services, we have an annual goal of 3,200 training hours. This year, the four centers combined hit 4,200. Our professional development services, we have 20,000 participation hours set as our annual goal, and we hit 20,823. Our technical support services is 7,000 hours. This was reduced last year from 7,500 hours because we hadn't ever hit that number. But this year we hit 77,339 hours in technical support. And then the number of higher education graduate credit hours delivered primarily through our endorsement programs and through our conferences. We had a goal of 1,500 and we were way over that this year at 2,777. And I think that's due to the addition of some new endorsement programs. And as Superintendent Northcott mentioned, you'll notice that we've kind of split up which centers are doing different endorsements so that we don't have duplication and we can specialize in the ones that we're providing. And that's been a really great option for the teachers across the region and across the state. We have teachers that participate from other LEAs that are not part of our 4 service regions. So anyway, that's our presentation. We're open for questions. If any of you board members have questions or any others, we're happy to take them at this time.
Okay, question from board members and member or Vice Chair Moss. I'm going to ask you to take point for a minute because I got a request to get on a call, something at the USBE building. So I'm just going to step out for just a second. But I think, don't we approve, is this a budget? Are we doing budget also on this? So I think that might be the next step. So Vice Chair Moss, are you good to take point for a minute?
Got it. You bet.
I'll mute and I'll see what I need to do here. Thank you.
Okay. And I forget who's driving it from our side. I did have a question or two, but are we also looking at a funding action item here? Whoever's, maybe that's to Duke or maybe it's to our staff.
Yes, Board Member Moss. So what's required of us to do annually is to provide a report to the State Board of Education. And as part of that report is our funding request. So the legislature appropriates $2 million to the RESAs annually. And so as part of we also submit an annual report to you that's included in your board packet of each of the 4 centers. But as part of that, based on board rule, we also request the funding that's appropriated from the legislature. So yeah, I believe it is an action item that the board needs to take to approve that funding.
Got it. Okay. And maybe for our staff, I mean, that sounds just like an approval of pass-through money. Is there anything for us to even consider there? It sounds like the money's there. We just need to release it. I'm not sure who our staff point is on this.
Chair Moss, can you see my screen?
No. Who is that? Let's see.
This is Cami.
Oh, hi, Cami. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have it showing up on just what the recommended action is, if you can see the.
Got it. Yes. Okay. And that's $2 million as allocated by the legislature, which we are simply approving distribution disbursement to the RESAs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vice Chair, did you have questions?
Yeah, before we get there, I was going to see if anybody did have questions or comments. Any committee members?
This is Vice Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Molly. I'm having a weird screen thing. There we go.
I sense that. So
I got you. You got Stacy and Kristen as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the work you do. I loved this presentation. I think that what you're doing in each of your respective areas is absolutely wonderful. And it's a huge task that I don't think people truly understand everything that you do. When you say you're a one-man district office, that just exhausts me beyond comprehension. And I just hats off to all of you. You're doing a Herculean task in a very efficient and meaningful manner. So I just wanted to say that, and Vice Chair, whenever you're ready, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Great. Okay, Member Norton and Member Hutchings. I don't know who's up first, but go ahead.
I have had quite a wonderful relationship with our SEDC in Southern Utah, and then through the Rural Conference, was able to interact with many of the other superintendents and directors. And I think we are getting more bang for our buck for the money that goes to these regional service centers, because the collaboration and hard work that they are putting in is impacting, not only just their districts, but their principals and right, into the classrooms and the teachers. And one of the highlights of my, first 6 months in this office has been to get a closer look at these RESAs and all that they do, and in providing the security, the safety, the professional learning. It's outstanding professional learning. So, if whatever we can do to keep this team together, let's go.
Amen. Thank you. Member Hutchings.
Yeah, I do have a specific wonder I'd love to get just some really quick feedback on. And that is when looking, I'm thinking more of like your high school students and being out in rural areas and struggling to find staff and understanding. I'm a principal at a high school, how hard it is sometimes to find teachers who teach different electives, to teach, AP and, the higher level, more rigorous classes. What resources do you use to be able to provide, we'll call it equity, to your high school students, so they have a diversity of electives to participate in and some of those higher level courses to take that you may not have staff in your district to provide? Do you use the state online education program? Do you partner with other districts or schools to have some distance learning? How, just really quickly, because I don't want to take a lot of time, but how do you do that, and what needs do you have in that specific area?
So it's kind of a combination of all of those things that you mentioned, Board Member Hutchings. So one of the main systems that we use is our Edgenuity software program. It's an online curriculum program that we've been using in our region for over 10 years now. Superintendent Northcott mentioned that he brought that to us when I was newly hired almost 15 years ago. Because of that reason, they Daggett, they have 150 kids district-wide, and so they were looking for options for their kids that wanted to go beyond the curriculum that's provided to their school. And so Edgenuity has a whole bunch of AP courses and higher, CTE courses, computer science, all these kind of things that you typically can't find qualified staff to teach within your school. So that's one option. And they have the option to use just strictly the online curriculum, or they can actually hire one of the teachers, Edgenuity teachers, to actually be a teacher and teach the kid or kids that want to access those courses. We also are heavily involved in concurrent enrollment. We actually helped pass a bill, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, to designate Snow College as the concurrent enrollment provider for all of the whole state, wherever there are holes in offerings that the local provider couldn't or wouldn't provide. And so that's another option that kids can access courses that they can't normally get. But then also within the regions, there is also some teaching or broadcasting of classes from one high school to another where they don't have a qualified teacher. And so, we're always looking at different ideas and different methods and models to use to provide as much equity for our kids as possible, because they definitely deserve it.
Looks like our chair's back.
Yes, and you're doing a great job there, Vice Chair Moss. I just, to Member Hudson's question in that, I just like to throw that invitation out to committee members. If you could ever find the opportunity to attend one of their board meetings, it is, they're exciting. It's a group of people that come in there, and there's some things from this big, well, there's different cultures out there of accountability, and one that I'm familiar with is the Oz principle, and there's a book called the Oz. But every time I'm into one of their meetings, they're into this space of, they see it, they own it, they solve it, they do it, and then before they're even done, at the end of the meeting, they're almost asking, what more can I do in this service arena? And a lot of times they're not on the front lines or on the front page like a school district, but they certainly ought to be. And it's been fun, I believe, for this board to go through the processes, RISA become RISA, to take, well, they got to be moved to the front burner and put in front of the legislature and for funding, and then also to our board on all their services. So thank you for your work, especially your work this past year during this pandemic. You guys stayed engaged. So thank you, and looking forward to many more wonderful things that you're doing. And I like this format. Hopefully we can continue in this. And then also, if there's committee members, if there's something that you might want to see more of or less of, they're very receptive to our request for a little bit more information. But this was very helpful. Thank you. Back to you, Jim, or Vice Chair Moss. I'll let you finish it out, and then I'll take the helm.
Superintendent Dixon had a hand up.
Thank you so much. I just want to take the opportunity for two things. I want to thank the regional service agencies. They are amazing. You've heard all the great things they do, but they are individuals who are so collaborative and so professional and so kind. And I appreciate all of the directors. I also want the board to know, this committee to know, that when part of the reason, as Chair Huntsman just outlined, for moving from centers to agencies, it provides more flexibility so that when we go to the legislature and we're asking for funding, we can specifically and explicitly talk about the role of the RISAs and divert some resources to the RISAs, or ask for funding where we would add an FTE to the RISAs. So you heard Duke mention that they'd added 4. And that's the kind of thing we want to see, is meeting the needs of that area of the schools and the districts in the service center. And then be able to say, if we're rolling this out, then what do you need as a service agency to be able to provide the best possible services? Social emotional learning, mental health, supporting new teachers, recruiting and retention. You've heard all the great things that they're doing. So that shift was really intentional. And if any of you want to drill down and know more details, we can certainly provide that for you. But I want to put it on your radar as we move into this session to always keep those agencies in mind and think about how they provide support for our rural areas. Thank you to all of you. You know I'm a big fan. Thanks.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I really appreciated the opportunity to go down to that URSA conference. It was spectacular. Down in Richfield, and to get to meet so many people, and also just see the scope of issues and the quality of people that were involved was amazing. So thank you for inviting us down to that. And I guess I do have one very quick question, since we got so many people on here, and I know this is a broad question, but just in terms of our support of your vision, I don't know if this is to Duke. But what do you see as kind of the next step as we're coming out of COVID? We heard a lot of great reports on developments, what people are working on, but is there any particular direction that you think that institutionally RISAs are looking to go, where you could use our support in kind of the next stage?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm gonna throw that back to some of the other directors. I think, you know, part of one thing that's brand new that we're starting this year is our pre-K3 early literacy coaching program that was initiated by USBE, and I think that's a major, you know, it was major support for one, but also will provide some targeted support to our LEAs to help them, you know, get their kids to grade level by third grade. And, you know, that's one example of what Superintendent Dixon talked about, you know, about including us in some of their initiatives and their ideas. And so, yeah, we're willing to help wherever we can. And I think, you know, it's programs like that, that's definitely a new direction. Joby, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I didn't. Thanks, Duke. Thanks,
I had one
Superintendent.
that I
Thanks,
wanted
Board.
Chairman
Jason.
Huntsman, this is Director Erickson of SCSC. So I would just say to all of you, thank you for your support to us as directors. I would concur with Duke on the early learning and the route we see that going, and we would just continue to ask for your support with that effort. I think we're seeing the evolution of that being invaluable and what that will provide for our rural schools. And in addition, and I know this has been on the table for some time, but again, compliments for the mental health support, the grants that we receive, and seeing how that's facilitated out through our LEAs and how that provides that mental health support for our students and their success, both emotionally, academically. So thank you for what you do. Just a shout out to all of you.
Thank you. Did I see Jason have a comment?
Yeah, I had a comment. I think that as we move forward and as we've had discussions as RESA directors, we have written our strategic plans with the Utah Rural Schools Association and our 4 RESAs to support the strategic plan of USBE and to also support the Portrait of a Graduate, the P20 standards. And I really think that that's probably our next evolution, is to really support and jump into that vision with the Portrait of the Graduate and the P20 standards and our early learning coaches like Duke has stated. And we just look forward to working and collaborating with the great people at USBE to help the students in our regions and our teachers.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can I just make one more comment? Just you know, for your information, you know, that the $2 million funding that we received from the legislature has been flat for us for, I think, going on 5 years now. And I think we're not hurting, you know, but that's just something we'll put in the back of your mind for maybe later in the future. In a year or two, we may need to seek some additional funding to help, you know, with inflation, et cetera.
Got it. Well, thank you. And I loved seeing, one of the things I'll just point out, I love that RESA is an opportunity for the district charter stuff. I was on the charter board. My kids have all gone to district schools. There sometimes is a little tension that's kind of built into that, but I love that RESA's provide an opportunity for some, you know, coordination and learning from each other. I loved seeing the Sterling Scholar Program. Most of you don't know, I got to hear Duke announce my daughter as the district Sterling Scholar winner in art for Wasatch a year ago. So that was pretty cool. So it was cool to see that as part of the support that RESA's give as well. Just lots of good stuff. So thank you. Chair, did I see, or did you want to take it back? I was ready to bring
You're going to finish this agenda item out. I just wanted the Vice Chair would entertain a motion. We do have some other business we need to take together. Yep. So a motion that the board approve the Regional Educational Service Agency budget for school fiscal year 22 as requested.
Any discussion of the motion? All members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. back to the chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And sorry I had to step away for just a moment. Okay, thank you, Risa. You're welcome to hang in our meeting. I've got to get back to my agenda on my other screen here. Next is actionable item 6. We're just trying to see who's taking point on the background on. Aaron Brough, are you with us? Yep.
Yes, I am.
Okay. We want to brief the committee.
You bet. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me just ask a first off question, time frame. Would you like the fast version or
fast version?
Fast version, awesome. Happy to do that. So we're talking about the early warning system pilot. We've had this pilot now running we're entering our 5th year. The legislation is coming to the end of this school year. It will be sunset. And so basically, we recommend that the legislature remove the repeal of the sunset and that the program be maintained and that there's a possibility the program be expanded to provide licenses for additional LEAs to participate in this. If we want to jump to the next slide or the presentation, just so you can see where we're currently at on the schools and the districts that are participating in the pilot program. So Ogden, Box Elder, Provo, Jordan, Nebo, Murray, and Davis School District are all participating in this pilot. The legislature provides directly to USBE $250,000 on an annual basis. The LEAs are responsible for the additional $250,000. So it's annually about a $500,000 price tag for or this opportunity for the schools to participate. We have a total, so budget-wise, we have up to 125 schools that can participate with the funding that we currently receive in this. This year, Jordan School District has wanted to get more districts or more schools involved with that. And you can see that they have 5 more schools that they are finding money to participate in addition to that. 2 other additional items of note. We know that with Superintendent Rich Nye moving to Granite School District, that his leadership coming from Ogden, he wants to repeat what he's been doing and the successes they have seen in Ogden and do that with Granite School District. So they're very much interested in expanding and adopting this program. And in addition to that, we've had discussions with Lexi Cunningham with USSA, reaching out again to the superintendents on the interest and utilization of this program. So again, the recommendation is that the board would look at this and would go to the legislature with a recommendation to repeal the sunset of the program and maintain it and then possibility of expanding it. And I'll entertain any questions and we can go deeper, obviously.
Okay, I thought your write-up and the backup was really was done very well. So thank you for that. Vice Chair Moss.
Very quick question. I was getting myself up to speed on the program. The surveys that go out, are these optional for the kids? Do they choose whether to respond or participate?
Yes. And the LEAs that are running it in the schools have the option on the frequency. It's based within the program itself. So yeah, they send it out. Give you an example, Ogden does it 3 times a year.
Do we know what the level of participation is roughly? I would assume it varies, but is there some idea of, given that it's optional for the kids, how many choose to participate?
That I don't know across. I know it's quite high in Ogden. Because we've looked at them in particular really close because of the fidelity, and they're about 98% participation rate. So it's very, very high there.
Thank you.
And And my understanding in the other schools, it's very high, but I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah.
So the opportunity before us right now is, well, there is a recommended action if somebody wants to make it.
I'll make it. I recommend that the committee, I move that the committee recommend that the board recommend the legislature maintain the early warning pilot program in Utah code and not allow the program to be repealed.
Okay, is there discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the motion before the committee is the committee recommends that the board recommend the legislature maintain the early warning pilot program in Utah code and not allow the program to be repealed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Thank you, Aaron Braffett. We could have brought in a lot of horsepower to support this particular motion, and I didn't think it was needed. So thank you, represented it very well.
Thank you.
Looking at time, we've got, I think, 3 more items here. Looking for the SOEP working group update. And I'm sorry, my computer is running a little slow and get back to my agenda. And actually, it's more me. I should have jumped on it as soon as we made the motion. Jennifer Thronson, are you taking point on this? Director Thronson.
Reminder that
I'm sorry,
recommended
between
action should be
having all these
drafted.
committee meetings, I got to turn one off. 1 second. Okay.
We're on that brief SOEP working group update.
Perfect. May I share my screen if possible? And we will make this one quick, so don't worry. And it's just connecting. Sorry, my computer has been, it's crashed a few times this morning, so we're just being a little extra patient today. Director Thronson from Teaching and Learning, and we are just providing an update as the board has requested, or the committee has requested, on the progress of the SOEP working group that was charged by this committee. And I'm just gonna, still won't do it. 1 second. How about now? Nope. All right, you're gonna get my full screen for a second, and we'll just make this larger. And hopefully it'll cover that up. There we go. All right. So this group was kind of directed by this committee to be created with response to the Superintendent's Association needs and desires around better understanding SOEP and addressing some of the issues that they have noticed. So I facilitate the group. There are a number of participants on this group, but we worked with Lexi Cunningham to determine the membership for the participants. So you'll see those on the screen. We have a few superintendents. We have an assistant superintendent. We have a principal of an SOEP school, a K-12 advisor of another SOEP school, a business administrator to kind of help with the financial aspects, and a representative from USBA. There are 3 staff members, including myself. There's also Dr. Jimmy Hernandez, who is our kind of research / educational specialist that can help with some of the data pools and questions that come up around what does the data look like in this way. And then, of course, Dr. Corey Camp is on the committee to kind of help. She knows the program super well and can support the deeper questions that the participants may have. We have met twice, once in June, once in July. We will meet again, I believe, in August. So it's kind of a monthly, every 4 to 6 weeks type meeting to be able to move forward. So in our first meeting, we established our scope of work. What are the things that this group wanted to be kind of digging into and better understanding and potentially informing on. So current topics, such as right now, you have a study session later this afternoon on the funding recommendations. We asked this group to kind of weigh in on their thoughts on the funding recommendations we'll be bringing to you this afternoon. If there's new legislation that's coming up, or you're kind of dealing with the current legislation, such as the online providers from out of state that are allowed now, just having discussions on kind of current hot topics. One of the topics that is on the list of scope of work is trimester schools. Currently, all of our SOEP programs are designed for semesters or quarters, not trimesters. We have a few trimester schools in the state, and looking at, do we look at flexibility there, or do we remain with the quarter semester options? So that's been a discussion that will wrap up in our August meeting. Teacher evaluation, how does that need to look different for teachers that are in an online distance environment versus the brick and mortar school? So the conversations, we haven't started that one yet, but that was brought up as a potential area of what does that look like and how does it look different than the traditional model. School accreditation, the typical accreditation process doesn't really have the parameters built out explicitly to deal with an online program. And so how might that look differently for accreditation in a SOEP type learning environment? That will be up for discussion, assuming you all are good with these topics. The history, funding, and design of the program, really just wanted to better understand the program. So Corey actually did some work with them in our last working group, just kind of introducing, the progress of the program, what its intent is, how it works and functions, to give a better understanding. Sometimes there's just this lack of understanding or misconceptions that have happened in the decade since the program was started. And so just being able to kind of do some clarity and allowing for questions and clarifications as desired by the participants. The next one is data reporting and review. So it's like, we've got some data discrepancies, and how about equity and access, those kinds of things coming up. And so they've just been interested in what data do we have. We've been working with a data working group as well to clean up the data. We've had some great progress in completion rates and being able to improve that data, and are moving forward with looking at the other evaluation components that we have and ensuring that we can report with accuracy and quality information. That's been a little troublesome in the past. The next one is program access. This is things like accessibility from the USCB standpoint. Michelle has brought up some good points there, but as well as, do students across the state have equitable access to the program? And then finally, what does concurrent enrollment look like in SOEP? Currently, is that what it should look like, and kind of future discussions around that? So that's the anticipated scope of work. Like I said, we've only really talked about options for trimester schools and didn't quite land on a decision point yet for there. And would love your guidance on what pieces you would like brought back to you. Trimester schools, we can bring it back and say, would the board be supportive if we did want to support trimesters and have that be approved by the board? Or if you would rather just staff handle some of these things, and a little direction there would be helpful. And with that, I will close my presentation and happy to answer questions.
Well, I really appreciate the, having this information and packaged the way it is. It meets the intent of this group, and you definitely, we know how to read, but it's fun to hear you speak to it also. So thank you for your presentation. Board members, do you have any questions or comments about this working group? And this is informational, we're not taking any action. Member Moss.
Quick question, Director Johnson, what's the kind of regulatory or rule framework around trimester schools? What are the limitations, if any, flexibility currently there, or what's being sought?
Yeah, so in terms of regulations, there's nothing that tells a school district which model they have. Most have moved to the quarter and semester model. I think we ended up with 11 that still schools that have a trimester option. Within SOEP, all of the current providers provide on a semester or quarter schedule. And so if you're in a trimester school, that makes it difficult for matching credits and things when it comes for kind of translating a transcript from a quarter system to a trimester. Not that it can't be done, but it adds some complexity. So UTVA, for example, Utah Virtual, was like, well, we would be willing, but as the working group kind of discussed it, there was some hesitation to allowing for that flexibility. And so that's where the working group kind of wanted to discuss a little bit more in our next meeting. Although there was, and UTVA is a SOEP provider, and they're like, well, we could probably make it work. It's just reformatting their courses to be trimester based instead of quarter and semester based. So there's potential, but the group was not consistent on whether they thought that was a good idea or not.
Gotcha, thanks.
Okay. Member Norton?
Yeah, in answering your question about what we felt maybe would be priority items on this list, I just want to throw out some of my priority items that you were listing there. And I think that that the school accreditation and making sure that we have really strong, good online schools would have to be paramount on that list, along with the teacher evaluation. And then, as we heard just recently, or just barely from our Reese's, these are really important programs for those rural schools and especially in their high schools and the concurrent enrollment. So making sure that we have good access for them would be, really important. And I hope that they will remember that, this is pretty vital in many parts of our state. So that's just my input on that question that you asked.
Thank you. Member Hart.
I second that. And can you send us what you just that slide? It didn't make it into board backup, and I just my memory's not that good. But I'd just like to review that. Or am I looking in the wrong place? I could not find it.
No, I prepped it this morning as just.
Oh, well, it's
all
beautiful for having.
I thought it'd be nice to give you like something to refer to without being over like. It's so I'll get it attached to board backup.
And I have it on my
and
list to get it in also. So
awesome.
Okay.
I did want to echo my priorities would be exactly what was said in terms of program quality, teacher quality, accreditation, and related to that, I don't think that we should dilute our resources for 11 schools that choose a different configuration. It's kind of up to them to make that work. I just don't see the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that. And I just, that's something that those schools take on and those districts take on. I don't see the need to spend that time or energy, regardless of how easy it is. I just don't think it's a priority or needs to be a priority, especially considering you came up with such a robust list of items to talk about and address. And there's so much space for growth and improvement and enlarging the whole online, and SOEP is just one part of that. So I agree. Program quality is foremost on my mind, and kudos to a great and robust agenda and plan.
And Director Thompson, I'm trying to throw my 2 cents in. I'm looking at the people that are on that group, and I think they have priorities too. It'll be interesting to see how they work together and move them up. And I think that's one of the big values of having a working group is that they have that opportunity. So I'm very much looking forward to what comes from that working group moving forward. So thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I know you're in and out of other committees. So can you make sure we get that in our packet and back up? Because so many times
to add, so you'll have that.
Those slides are really important when we want to look back and say, what was that again? And it works good for me. Thank you. Well, all right, we'll move to our next agenda item, and Do we have our ESSA coordinator, Rebecca Donaldson?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, this is an actionable item, but do you want to give some brief background?
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Rebecca Donaldson. I'm the coordinator of ESSA programs and related state initiatives. And we received information recently from the Department of Education about 2 waivers that they are offering. So we're bringing this to the committee today for your consideration. The first one is in Title I programs, there is a provision that an LEA may request to carry over more than 15% of their previous year's allocation into the next fiscal year once every 3 years. They can carry up to 15% in a year, but only once in 3 years can they carry over more than 15%. So this would impact our federal fiscal year 2019 funds, which were provided to our LEAs for state fiscal year 2021. And we have heard from a few LEAs that had funds set aside to support the parts of their plan, say for meaningful parent and family engagement activities. Due to the pandemic, it was very difficult for them to carry those activities out safely. So we do have a few LEAs that would benefit from that waiver. And so if this waiver were requested from the Department of Ed, that waiver for the fiscal year 2020 funds or for state fiscal year 21 would not count against an LEA as one of those 3 years that they could request that waiver. The second waiver is a waiver of the General Education Provisions Act. This would extend our federal fiscal year 2019, all of the title programs. So those were funds provided to LEAs for state school year 2020. That would give them 1 additional year. Currently, those funds are slated to expire on September 30th of this year. It would provide LEAs with 1 additional year, and the funds would then expire on September 30th of 2022. And again, that waiver would apply to all of the title program funds. So what we're asking is that the committee provides us with direction to request those waivers. We do need to provide opportunities for stakeholders to have input and provide their feedback as well. Thank you.
So my understanding is these are waivers only, and the conditions to the money, none of that has changed from the initial funding application. And so I know that a lot of people are very sensitive of changes, but my understanding there isn't any changes. This is just a pure waiver based on our previous application and requirements. Okay, Member Hart.
If I'm ready to make a motion unless there's committee members with questions.
Not seeing any other hands raised.
Okay, then I move that the Finance Committee direct staff to apply for the waivers before the September 1st, 2021 deadline.
Okay. Not seeing any discussion. Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I do. I hate money being spent just for the sake of spending money, and additional time allows for that money to be spent prudently and responsibly. I have my feelings on federal money, but I do think that it should be spent properly. And the time would allow the schools and districts and LEAs to do that.
Okay. Vice Chair Moss.
Just real briefly, I'm a big fan of Cheryl Ellsworth and the work she does in parental outreach and engagement. I think especially that's something that suffered in COVID. So just on that note, if we don't hear from her much in our meetings, I'm curious if there's anything more we need to do to support the work she's doing. But I certainly appreciate this waiver, at least in I know it's more broad than that, but the one sounds like some of it will go to that work. And so I'm fully in support there. And just to throw that out there, I'm curious if we need to hear from her on any other, ways of supporting her work during this catch-up period.
The invitation is always out there, and it's continued to be out there if we need to hear more or do more. So we'll keep that invitation out. Okay, we have a motion, committee motion here, and that before the committee, and that is the finance committee direct staff to apply for the waivers before the September 1st, 2021 deadline. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman.
Okay. Next, we have a discussion and update on House Bill 300. And we have Darren Nielsen and Jill Curry. Program Analyst Curry. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, this might be your last time presenting to the committee, because I don't think you'll be with us in our board meeting. And I hear you're going to another place that's not too far away, up on the hill in the governor's office. And I just, before we get into this presentation, I just want to sincerely thank you for your contribution that you have made, and you're going to be missed. And I'm really, not only am I going to miss you, but I'm going to miss seeing that really fancy artwork that
we've lost you, Chair. You're frozen.
Am I still frozen?
There you go. You're back.
Okay. So did I get my gratitude out?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Going far, and it's not a really big goodbye. It's a see you later. You're going to be in another, well, in the governor, working with the governor's office. So did you want to say something about your departure before we get into the agenda item?
I think the only thing I have to say is thank you for the opportunity I've had at the state board. I've really enjoyed my time there, and I feel I've just been so fortunate to work with amazing coworkers and amazing board members, and for that I'm extremely grateful. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm just wondering if there's something I can say to the governor about poaching. Here we go again. I'm like, okay. I'm just teasing. Well, thank you. Let's dive into this. Who's taking point? Jill, is that you or Darren?
Yeah, I'm happy to, unless Assistant Superintendent Nielsen wants to.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
Okay. And is it okay if I share my screen?
You should have access to now, Jill.
Okay. Okay, is that showing the slide deck?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so Jill Curry, Program Analyst, State Board of Education. So today, Assistant Superintendent Nielsen and I will be giving you an update on House Bill 300, just as a really brief kind of reminder, HB 300 was passed in the 2021 general session. This bill requires the state board to review reports that are required in statute and in rule. And then we're also tasked with working with LEAs to develop that review process. So first, I'll start by talking about our progress so far. Okay, hopefully that clicked ahead. So kind of the first task that was done was the creation of a comprehensive list of required reports. This work was actually started over a year ago by Director Van Holten and Assistant Superintendent Nielsen. So you can see the link in the slide deck, actually links to that list that was presented to Education Interim Committee last interim. The next step, kind of how we've taken it further in the meantime, is gone through and identified USBE staff contacts for each of those reports. And then we've started prioritizing reports for the review process. So that way we can really begin tackling those reports that LEAs feel are most cumbersome. We think those reports are kind of most important to review upfront. Keep in mind the backup was submitted about a couple weeks ago. So we've made some additional progress since then. So that third step, developing a data collection tool for staff and for LEAs, that item is still in progress, but my goal is to have a solid draft of that tool by hopefully early next week. And then because this process requires that we work with LEAs to kind of institute the review process, we have presented the draft process to USSA. That was done on July 30th, and we received their feedback. We're before you today to give you an update in Finance Committee. And then on Monday of next week, we will be presenting the process to charter directors. Okay, I am going to skip ahead and talk about the draft process. And then at the end, I'm going to come back to this slide of next steps, because I think it'll make more sense once I cover the draft process. So the slides that I'm skipping ahead to, these are the slides from our presentation to USSA. So I'm going to start here. One thing that I think it's important to keep in mind with HB 300 is that the data that we're going to need to collect on each reporting requirement is pretty specific for each report. So you can see on this slide some of the elements that we're going to need to know about each report before making a recommendation on what we need to do with that report. So we're going to need to know what the purpose of the report is, how successful the report is in achieving that purpose, which entity requires the report, which entity created the reporting requirement, which entity reviews the report, whether the report is the least burdensome way to collect the information, or maybe there's another way we can go about getting that information that's more streamlined or consolidates other reporting requirements. And then the estimated time and cost it takes, both for USBE and for our LEAs, to complete the reporting requirement. So again, these are pieces of information that we're going to need for each report. Okay, so next I'll walk you through our draft report review process. I want you to keep in mind it's a draft. So certainly if there are things that we've laid out in this draft process where you're like, that's not the way I think it should go, then we definitely want that feedback. Okay, so for the first step, again, kind of what we already talked about, identifying and prioritizing reporting requirements to review. Then from there, we can begin our data collection efforts. So here we will send out a Qualtrics survey is kind of where we've landed so far on what our best data collection tool might be. So this survey would go to relevant USBE staff and also relevant individuals within each LEA. And again, this survey would serve as our kind of main data collection tool that we would use to collect that information. In step 3, the surveys are completed, the results are summarized. And then in step 4, we would bring that information to a review committee. This committee would be made up of different representatives. It would include LEA representatives to review those survey results and discuss potential further actions. And then in step 5, we would bring this information from the review committee to superintendency. And so then what happens from there? So we kind of see 3 potential actions depending on the results of the review. If no action is needed regarding the reporting requirement, then our plan would be to provide a written update to the board. If a rule change is needed to address something in the reporting requirement, then we could utilize the board's rulemaking process to make that change. If legislative action is needed, we would bring the request to the board. And if the board approves it, we would pursue statutory changes with the legislature. And then, so let me circle back to those next steps. Okay, so next steps in the kind of overall picture. One is making any revisions we need to make to the review process. And then if needed, bring this process back to the board in September. Once the review process is set, then we can really begin this data collection effort on the reporting requirements, again, starting with those prioritized reports. And we can also start organizing and scheduling the review committee meetings to review that data and discuss future actions, and then kind of start on that reporting mechanism to superintendency and the board. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I thought there'd be 1 or 2. Vice Chair Moss.
I'm just going to say it looks like a great process, and thank you. I'm glad this is underway and responding to the concerns that have been addressed. So thanks for the great briefing.
Thank you.
Superintendent Nielsen, do you have anything to add on this that hasn't been said, or?
Yeah, Dr. Curry's done a great job in putting this together, and it was a pleasure to present with her to the Superintendent's Association. I look forward to meeting with charter directors on Monday afternoon. You might be interested to know that there was a lot of questions from the superintendents as we talked with them about what level of involvement they felt was appropriate for them to have. If you think back to the slide that talked about the process, step 2 is where we had some discussion around a survey. Earlier in today's meeting, there was a discussion around whether a survey is a report. And so there was discussion with the superintendents about that. And then the committee. So we focused on, with superintendents and also with our charter directors on Monday of where do they see the most meaningful way to be involved. If we don't send out a survey, then it's a very select or small group of LEA representatives that would be involved in the process. So the purpose of using a survey tool in addition to a committee review, which is step 4 on the proposal, is to give every LEA an opportunity, or the representative from an LEA that has a responsibility for completing a given report to give their input. And then the committee is where the decision's made around what the next step would be, whether there would be no action recommended, rule change recommended, or state statute change recommended. But it is exciting to have this in conjunction with the bill you talked about earlier, House Bill 45 earlier this morning, to try to look at things as they're coming into the system. This process, I could see taking quite a while as we go through this extensive list of reports. Some we'll be able to review very quickly, and others might take more time. But it's exciting for me as an educator to be involved in a process of really reducing the burden on our LEAs and really examining whether the things that we collect from our LEAs are meaningful and whether they're making a difference to our overall vision and mission and strategic plan of the board.
Okay, thank you. Member Hart?
I'm wondering, I'm just really concerned that I guess I don't know how exactly to phrase this, but that the reports that are reported up are accurate from the I'm not saying they're not, superintendents are not accurate, but I am saying that sometimes I'm worried about going through just one person in a district and whether or not they're always aware of all the different places that, and I realize that's their burden, but I'm wondering if there's also a way to do some sort of, and this is kind of far out, so I just maybe talk me through how you approach this problem, because I'm sure you've thought of this. You know, have you like crowdsourcing? Like as a person that is at the very end of the road with you know, data inquiries, they come from all over a district, and how are we making sure that that list is entirely accurate or complete? Could we crowdsource so that maybe principals that we go a layer deeper? I actually am very, I think the charters, our directors maybe even have a better picture sometimes because they're a smaller organization. Or heck, we could go ask the one-stop shops down in the Reese's, but you know, it's just some of the larger districts, I don't know that they even know. And that sounds insulting. I don't mean that way. I just want to make sure the whole point of this is to get our arms around the whole thing because it's big. And what kind of, I guess, redundancy do you have to make sure that your lists are complete?
Chair, if I may.
Let's answer that one, Jill.
Sure. So let me just be sure I'm hearing you correctly. So in terms of complete lists, do you mean who from the LEA is responding, or whether whether that master list of reports is accurate? Okay,
that's what I'm, and I realize that may be up to a superintendent to assign out, or I mean, I see this, you know, cascading. I would hope that this would be an interesting exercise for superintendents to also reflect on what they're asking their, you know, folks to do, but just making sure that we're not, you know, getting half of them, or which I'm not saying that you would. I just wonder what redundancy is there for accurate data.
So right now, the list that we're working from contains 96 reporting requirements that were pulled from statute, and then 53 in rule. Although I think as we go back through, we'll see that some of what's in rule is in there because of what's in statute. And so there we probably have redundancies and may not need to send out 2 surveys to reflect both of those. From combing through the list, I think what we have is pretty comprehensive. My assumption, though, is that we probably haven't captured everything, and that as we go, we may be adding to that list and then developing a survey to reflect that reporting requirement and then sending those out. So I'm kind of assuming as we start digging into these reporting requirements that the list is going to change, at least at the margins, and it's going to expand. And then we'll kind of seek to collect those pieces of information about those reporting requirements as we become aware of them.
So the process is fluid and you're not moving from one and then working with that group of reports. It is open to expanding once. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. Great presentation and thank you. And Jill, we'll be seeing you around.
Thank you.
Next, we have, this is actionable. Our timing, thank you, we're doing okay here. Is our out-of-state tuition reimbursement. And Jake, I saw you flash up there. There you are.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. I can, this should be a relatively brief agenda item. Again, this is Jake Haptrow, Minimum School Program Administrator. I was just going to ask if I could share my screen, but that works. So just briefly, this is a request from, well, only Box Elder to reimburse for the costs of tuition for students that attend out-of-state school districts or schools. And the total for this year that all of this is based on, statute and board rule. There's a calculation associated with that, which is what is in front of you. After everything was said and done, the reimbursement request for this year is $48,707.17 to be paid to Box Elder. So if there are any questions, I can take those. Otherwise, we just need board authorization to move forward with this.
Okay, questions from board members. Board member Hart, I see your hands up.
No, that's my bad.
So I just have one. Can you speak at all? Do you recall where we were at a year ago on this? I'm just curious.
I want to say about 80 some odd $1,000. One of the school districts, I believe South Summit, which is all zeroed out this year, they had a family or multiple families that were attending out of state last school year, but not this school year that just came to a close. So 2 LEAs were reimbursed last year versus 1 this year. So that's the reason for the variance.
So this is all part of our transparency and it is part of a statute. So
yes.
And the chair of the finance committee can make a motion. So I'll get in line and make one today. Well, let me ask, who hasn't had a chance to make a motion today? Somebody want to get in on this one? Oh, okay. Member Norton. Do you want to make this one?
I will. I move it is that the board authorize payments to applying school districts pursuant to 53F-2-304, subsection 8, 53G-6-305, subsection 3 and A, and R277-421, and is outlined in fiscal year 2021 final out-of-state tuition backup documents.
You said that very well. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I don't think I have to repeat it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? The voting was unanimous. Thank you. We didn't have anything to report on, well, we didn't have any requests for information and et cetera. Let me see if I'm missing anything. I got a text. Oh, I think there's one more adios that I've got to recognize. Jake, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, I understand that you're moving to another place also. So want to thank you for your service and that it's and putting this together. Well,
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Chair. It's been a great 2 years here at the state board, and thank you to all the board members and staff here that have worked with me, and spent a lot of hours with. So yeah, very, very much appreciate the opportunity that was afforded to me here.
Well, we appreciate your service and all that you've done in moving these veterans forward, and especially in these programs. Good luck to you. Again, it's like, hopefully it's a see you later, not goodbye. So thank you, Jake.
Yeah, thank you.
In our packet, so just for people's awareness, we always have that information piece there, or update on the information side on that, on our USIMs. So board members, do you have any questions? Or let's see, Vice Chair Moss, your hand is raised.
Sorry, I was just going to offer a thanks to Jake and Jill as well, especially from us new board members, for getting us up to speed when we all came on. This committee happens to be full of new board members, and there's a lot of complicated stuff to learn here. So thanks to both of you for bringing us along these last 6 months, and best of luck, and let us know what we can do to not lose more of you. We appreciate all you've done, and yeah, just best of luck and everything going forward.
Okay.
Ditto.
Committee members, any loose ends? I want to thank you as committee members of your due diligence and how you get into the packet and ask questions early. This is an awesome committee. As Vice Chair Moss said, is that there's a lot of new members here. I guess it makes me an old member. I still feel very, very new at this. I have not, on some, of course I can choose being the chair, served on other committees, but again, we've got like close to $6 billion that passed through this agency. There's a tremendous amount of accountability and stewardship in that, and I appreciate your willingness to serve on this committee and again do the work that you do in moving this forward. So thank you. I believe Deborah Jacobson, is there anything I'm missing? Any loose ends? Cami? I'm not hearing of any. Thank you. We have our work meeting starting in an hour. Thank you. Be safe and take care.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you. See you in a bit.